What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a new Netflix film that I got to check out just a little bit early, and that film is called Emilia Pérez. Directed by Jacques Audiard, who wrote this film alongside several others. This film stars people like Zoe Saldaña, Karla, Sofia, Gascón, Selena Gomez, Edgar Ramirez, and more. So I just got home from an early press screening for Emilia Pérez, and it's always cool to be able to see a movie that has my name in the title, not something that I get to see every day. And so I'm getting to check this out ahead of its release in select theaters starting on November 1st, and then of course ahead of its release on Netflix for streaming starting on November 13th. And this is a film that I won't lie to you, it's kept me kind of divided. Right after the movie was over, we spent about 40 minutes outside talking about the movie with the several other people that I saw the film with, and even spent another 40 minutes or so on the drive home talking about the film. And I'm still rather divided on certain things, and I want to make sure that I speak about this film in a way that gets across what this movie is all about, what the positives are, and then we'll get into my personal opinion on the film. But before we do that, let's get into what this film is all about. The movie takes place in Mexico, and we're introduced immediately to Zoe Saldaña's character, Rita. She's a lawyer who ends up finding herself being hired by a cartel boss known as Manitas, who is essentially wanting to leave this life behind, but most notably wants to become a woman, wants to go through the surgeries necessary to lead a life as a woman as he always has wanted to. And so now Zoe Saldaña's character has to help kind of figure out how that can work, find some doctors who are willing to do this surgery, and then that's when we're introduced to Emilia Pérez, the title character, who is now this cartel boss becoming Emilia Pérez. And the majority of the film is focused on them, Zoe Saldaña's character alongside them, being a friend, and the life that they now kind of have to lead as this woman they've always needed to be. And the movie tackles a lot of different things as time goes on. Emilia Pérez in this film is played by Karla Sofia Gascón, who also plays the male version of the character earlier in the film. You also have people like Selena Gomez in the film as the character of Jessie, who is the wife to this cartel boss who has now become a woman. And you also have people like Edgar Ramirez in here, who plays the character of Gustavo, who is a bit of a love interest that appears for Selena Gomez's character at a certain point. And this is a film that's kind of difficult to talk about in a lot of ways because it balances a lot of things. On one hand, it is a film about a drug cartel, Mexico cartel boss becoming a woman and what it is to deal with that, the struggles that come with that. But the film also tackles the idea of starting a new life and leaving the negativity behind you, leaving this darker history behind you that you no longer want to live in, and starting this new life and living it and leading it differently, doing things to try to make the world around you better, and maybe even try to make up for some of the dark things that you did in your past. On the flip side, the film also tackles the idea that you can't always fully run away from who you were or what was inside of you, that the fact that what you were, who you were, what you did is still going to follow you into the future in some way, shape, or form. And while all that's happening, the film is also tackling being this crime drama that has comedic elements, and most notably is also a musical. This film, throughout the course of the film, from the very beginning all the way up to the very end, is a musical with musical numbers that will completely stop the movie just to, push the story forward, or sometimes just have a conversation play out as musicals typically do. And this is where the film I found myself struggling with the most. I think the first musical number in the film is pretty solid. I thought that it was well done. The choreography solid. I thought the vocal performances were done well. There's a sing speech kind of thing going on throughout the course of the film. There's a staccato nature to the film when it comes down to those musical elements that I thought was really interesting. And there's certainly this element about the music that's very rhythmic, that gave it its own identity when it came down to the vocalizations, as well as a lot of the choreography that is very much lining up to the rhythmic natures of the musical numbers. Something that's also worth mentioning is that majority of this film is spoken in Spanish with English subtitles. There are segments that are in English, but predominantly this film is in Spanish. And so as a Spanish speaking individual myself, it was interesting to watch the film in Spanish. I do want to say that one thing that was notable to both myself and my mom, who was my +1 for tonight, we both recognized that the subtitles a lot of times were a little bit too literal for what was actually being said. So I do think that if you were a Spanish speaking person, you are going to take a little bit more away from what's being said and what's happening in this film, especially in the musical numbers, than you are if you're not necessarily familiar with Spanish or don't know how to speak it and you're just going based off of the subtitles. I figured that was worth mentioning here. But yeah, when it comes down to the musical numbers, I do think that they were well done. But tonally, I felt that they were a little bit all over the place, if I'm completely honest. I felt like there were parts of it that felt dramatic. There were parts of some of the musical numbers that were very abstract and very artistic. There was a lot about the editing and the choreography, the performances and the vocal performances that were good. And then you have certain parts in there that are really pushing the story forward and tackling the various themes that this film tackles. And that's where I felt this film really had its strengths. On the flip side though, the film is also trying to be a comedy at times, and I honestly felt like it oftentimes undercut a lot of the messaging and themes that this film is trying to portray. The film has these random musical numbers at times that come off overly goofy in a way where you're questioning to yourself, what am I even watching? I would honestly say that the first half of the film felt like a bit of a jumbled mess for me, with the latter half of the film being where majority of the drama is, where majority of the character arcs are, and where majority of the story is. And I found myself struggling with this film, honestly, as you can tell, because I found it to be very well made. I found this film to be incredibly well made when it comes down to the cinematography, the wardrobe department, the choreography for the musical numbers. I thought that the performances from all of the actors were pretty solid, most notably Zoe Saldaña, as well as Karla, Sofia, Gascón. I thought that the two of them were great in the film, in the musical numbers and in just regular dialogue. Selena Gomez was probably my least favorite performance of the film, but I do think this is probably one of her better performances. And I think when you look at actors and actresses like Zoe Saldaña and Selena Gomez, this is a pretty ballsy, risky film, a very different abstract choice for them to do at this point in their careers. And so there is an element of admiration simply for seeing something so different, so ballsy, so provocative in a lot of ways. This film definitely toes a line. I think this is the kind of film that many will love and that many will hate. Since we are dealing with the idea of, an individual, transitioning their genders, there is going to be a specific sect of the audience that's going to feel like this is pandering, that this is an agenda pushing film. And then there's also going to be a percentage of the audience that feels like it's an empowerment film. And I find myself in this weird spot in the middle where I feel like it kind of was a bit of both, because on one hand, I feel like the film is an empowerment film for the trans community. But at times, I feel like certain story decisions and certain things that happen in the film kind of undercut that empowerment narrative. The film in a lot of ways is about the idea of transitioning to a new person and leaving that darkness behind you, while also tackling the notion, like I mentioned before, of the past still being with you and who you were still being with you. And I think that it's true in a lot of ways, right? This film is very much an idea of, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And so I found all of that to be really interesting and compelling. But with all of this said, with all the positives I've said about this film, I ultimately found that the film lacked focus narratively, and with the tonal indifferences at times in some of these musical numbers, and just from scene to scene, certain moments of dialogue as well, and some just wasted side characters and some romances that are thrown into the mix that ultimately I felt just never really added to anything. What you have for me here is a film that I can see the vision for, a film that I think is really artistic, abstract, and different, a very unique film, one of the most unique films of 2024, but ultimately a film that never really connected with me. It was a film that had me going up and down. There was moments I found myself more connected to what was going on, more impressed with the film, and times where I was kind of holding back laughs at the film because of how goofy and weird it got, but in the wrong ways. There was parts of this film that made me feel like I was on board, and parts that made me feel like I'm like, what is the vision? What are they trying to say here? And that's just kind of how I felt throughout the entirety of the runtime, to the point that I got to the end and I was just kind of like, I can't really say that I fully care about these characters. I can't really say I fully feel invested. And I think that that's something a lot of people are going to deal with, because hearing some of the other thoughts in the theater that I was in, talking to some of the other individuals who saw the film tonight, it seemed like we all had this interesting consensus while also having these varying differences. But it seemed like for a lot of us, it was this film that we were all super impressed by on so many technical levels, but struggled to connect to the story in so many ways. And I even overheard somebody else in the theater say that they just felt like the film didn't really know what it was trying to say. And that's honestly a great way to put it. I really at times didn't know what this movie was trying to say. There was times, again, I was on board, but it really genuinely left me torn and ultimately left me a little bit more sour. It's a film that left me a little bit more negative, where I could see the vision, where I was impressed by so much. And I'm more impressed that the actresses in this, took this risk to make this really different, ballsy musical film that tackles trans, individuals and all that kind of stuff. It's a film that is going to be super divisive in the world of Netflix and just in the world of film in general. So I do look forward to hearing the various opinions, but it's not one of those films I can see everybody loving in any way, shape, or form. This is going to be a very divisive film once more people get the chance to see it. But I think people who are big film fans are undeniably going to be able to be impressed by a lot of the filmmaking and display here. But I wouldn't be surprised to hear people being really torn with this one. And you can probably tell here, I'm struggling to find my words a little bit. And I wrote my words down. I have notes here. I wrote a letterbox review. I talked about this for the last 2 hours. And I still am finding myself challenged by the film. And on one hand, I kind of appreciate that. But on the other hand, it makes it a little bit difficult to talk about it because I can't say that I love this film or even really liked it. But I do think that there's a lot of artistic merit to it. And it takes a big swing. I just don't know if it's a hit or a miss for me. I would say that for me, it was a little bit more of a miss. But I don't think it's going to be a miss for everybody. So that's going to be my thoughts on Emilia Pérez. I look forward to hearing all the various opinions on this one. Definitely leave some comments down below. Did you like this film? Did you not like this film? Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? Whatever the case may be, I look forward to hearing all the various opinions. And I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.